Hey, happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of Up Next. It's been a very long time since I've popped on here in the middle of the day. Typically, I'm not doing anything in the middle of the day. I do all the episodes at 8:30 at night, but two special guests that I have with me that I admire a whole lot. I thought, what the heck? I can get on here in the middle of the day and do a 1:30 show and just kind of have some real conversation. And so to dive right into it, for if you've been living under the rock or if you haven't, there's a lot going on. And I thought listening to two voices in our community that we see often would be a great opportunity to have some dialogue about what should we be thinking about going into the holidays and as we kind of move forward into 2021. And I feel like my guest needs no introduction. And so I'm very gracious that they're here with me today. Councilman Eric Bunch and Jason Kander, and I'm super excited to have them both. And we're here.
Howdy.
Hey, how are you guys doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Same.
Thanks for jumping on, Eric. I like the beard, Councilman. What's going on?
I figured if you got to wear a mask all the time, now's the time to grow out a beard and maybe cool mustache. I don't know. We'll see where things go.
Yeah, you definitely got to trim down to the mustache before you get rid of the beard. It's an important part of the process.
Usually is the final step in the transformation from beard to no beard is a pretty cool mustache. We'll see where that goes though. There's just so much more gray in here now than there used to be. So I think kids will do that to you, and a lot more gray in 2020. Actually, I think it goes without saying that this year's been a little interesting.
I had a mustache till a few days ago, and it was weird because like this side of it was gray, and this time, and so it looked like at first glance it looked like I just had half a mustache.
Wow, impressive.
Getting old is weird. It really is.
Hey, what's one word you guys would use to describe 2020?
Long.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, fascinatingly long.
It's I'll go outside of one word, but it is really interesting, and it's been interesting being in this new position that I'm in. And sort of going through a lot of the struggle that everyone else is, and I have it about as good as you possibly can in this situation, but we're all sort of out here trying to feel our way through it. And I think that's a difficult thing to explain to folks, that things are going to get better, but also I'm with you. I'm trying to figure out how to educate my kids and make it into work every day. And it is really an interesting, a fascinating year for sure.
I think one of the most interesting things about it will be stuff that we won't know for a couple more years, right? Like, how has it changed norms? I mean, what we're doing right now, right? I mean, in the past, when somebody asked me, particularly somebody local, would you be on, my program, my podcast, my show, whatever? I mean, if it was local, I'd have to think about, okay, I got to go down there, right? Yeah. And then even, I do some occasional national TV stuff, and even that was like, there's a, Eric's probably done some of this too. There's a studio in downtown Kansas City. It's at like 19th and Wyandotte or something, and I live out south. So like the idea of saying yes to go on, and this is like a high class thing. I'm just this current example is all I'm using. I'm not saying like this is how it's affected everyone's life. I'm just saying every little thing, just what we're doing right now. So like in the past, even if I wanted to do a remote TV thing, like it was a commitment of time. You had to drive down, and now like I just open this computer and I do it. And so that's like one example of how I think norms will change, like meetings, right? Like for my work at Veterans Community Project prior to COVID, I was going to New York every 6 weeks, spending 3 days, raising good money. But now like I can do that without leaving this room. I can take 6 meetings in New York. So I guess my point is, I hope that some of these changes stay in place, and that we remember that like we don't have to get on a plane and go physically be in the same place to do some business with people.
For sure.
Yeah, much to the chagrin of the airline industry, I suppose. But
that's true, yeah.
There are, I think, some positive lessons to learn from this, and I hate to say that we would ever use a pandemic where we're losing thousands of lives in this country to but there is a silver lining, I
Sure.
think, everything. And from a local perspective and a local policymaking perspective, does this change like how we develop as a city? Does this change what office environments look like? We've got multiple office towers that are under construction, soon to be under construction right now in downtown. And what does that look like? Do we need more office space to keep people separated because we're keenly aware of putting people in close quarters, or are we going to have less office space because more people are working from home? I think it's probably going to be a bit of both, but Jason's right. Like what is this going to look like in 2, 3, 4 years? And what positive things come out of it, but what also, like, will we ever shake hands again?
Right. For sure.
Will we ever feel comfortable being in close quarters with everyone? I think we will. But there's it's not going to be a light switch, I think, what everyone would hoped at the beginning, unfortunately.
Eric, one of the things that I'm wondering, that's a question for a city council person, is like whether it's an opportunity, because, one of our biggest problems, and, in the 5 minutes that I was running for mayor, one of the things I talked about and thought about the most and still think about all the time is how do we keep talented people here, right? Like, 'cause I just think so much of what we're all trying to do at every level is, particularly in places like the Midwest, is like make it so that our kids don't have to leave in order to get a good job. And so on the one hand, you've got the problem of like, are we going to fill these office towers back up? But on the other hand, it's like, hey, if you can go to, if you can work at a job in Boston or New York without physically going there, is that potentially a huge win for communities like ours that are so livable?
Right. That's the cost of living is so much lower. The most striking example that I've heard of so far is in the Bay Area with Pinterest. They broke a lease, and I forget how many millions of dollars that cost them to break the lease, because they know that they're never going to return back to the way things were. They don't need the office space. And those employees, they can pay them the same amount of money to work remotely, at least somewhat remotely, and in cities that where the cost of living is so much lower, like Kansas City. I think you're right. And I think that, and so I think that gives us an opportunity at the local level to figure out what it is that makes the quality of life such that people want to stay here. Cause I think it's only the jobs are only part of it. And what, what drew me to Denver when my wife and I moved to Denver years ago, was the quality of life. And, we're never going to get mountains in Kansas City. I hope not. That would be pretty drastic.
After this year, like, you really don't know, right?
But what can we do to,
as long as we don't get beachfront property, that's good.
Yeah. Beachfront property would be interesting here, but,
and I was going to say, that's a whole nother conversation when you talk about, Jason, just retention efforts in Kansas City, because we are a great city. But, when you start talking about employment and your kids and hopefully not having to look outside the city for a job, we have a great opportunities to start engaging employee resource groups and HR, talent acquisition, the whole nine, to make Kansas City better. But it has to be at the forefront of, to your point, and at the councilman level to start, champion to companies and other jurisdictions. I'm not sure how those implementations work, to say like, hey, we don't want, Kansas City's talent to just be here. And then just all of a sudden it's like, oh, like Kiona's moved to Texas, like.
Well, please don't do that. We want to keep you here.
Kiona. No, I was gonna say, like, Kiona, like, we're talking about this in the abstract, but you're a great deal younger than us. You're not having conversations about gray hair and that kind of thing. so actually I would just be interested, like, you're here. You grew up here, right?
Yeah, but we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you guys.
But I'm curious, I'm sure a lot of your peers have left.
For sure.
And you haven't. So I'm curious what has kept you. And I'm sure the answer is something great. Like, I just love Kansas City and I appreciate that and everything. But also there's got to be some tangible stuff.
For sure.
We can all benefit from hearing about.
Yeah, no, I think when I think about why I made the decision to move here after college was because I saw so much opportunity. And that's where Black Excellence Kansas City came into fruition for me to found, because I saw just that, the problem that we have so many high functioning Black professionals in our city. And when we talk about Kansas City having these, equity policies and just diversity in our communities and workplaces. We can't keep championing that if we are losing them every single year and we don't have the policy or just basic procedures in place. Who are you contracting with? How are we making sure we're meeting that quota every single quarter or that audit or whatever? And we need an organization in Kansas City that their prime focus is doing just that. It is working with people on the councilman level. It's C-level suite executives, people like yourself, Jason and Eric, that say, hey, we want to see a better Kansas City, and not to make this a black and white thing or people of color thing.
It largely is, though.
Yeah,
so
but we can't. We can't say here's the heart of Kansas City, and only white Kansas Cityans relate to that. It's just not going to make our city better as we look 5 to 10 years down the road. And if you want true story, #true story, and then the bunch gang to see man, Kansas City is a really great place. This is what my dad was talking about. This is what my father was, advocating for in city council. And I think Kansas City is a great place, not to knock our city and our community, but we definitely have a lot of work to do when it comes to making sure that young professionals, black or white, have the opportunities and the pathways open, just like you guys were able to do, and now have that successful opportunity. So I think it's there. But yeah, for me, I just saw it as an opportunity to say, look, you can be here. And sometimes it's not going to be me working for somebody else. Sometimes you're going to have to advocate and not necessarily have, the financial means to do it, but just go out on a whim and say, this is what I'm doing. I don't care who doesn't like it or who does. And hopefully you come on board. If not, I'll see you in a year or 2 years down the road. And that's kind of my story and how I got to where I am. So
it's fair to say that it's not a matter of we fix the problem. In your case, it's a matter of you have faith that it can be fixed. So you're on the leading edge of it. Eric, Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, well, I was going to say the same thing. I had a fairly similar experience in Kansas City as my adopted city. I'm not originally from here. But I did want to say that, Kiona, that one of the, I guess, startling things that I've seen over and over again are young Black professionals leaving Kansas City because they don't feel that this is a place that welcomes them. And hearing folks like, to put it bluntly, hearing Dr. Bedell, the school district superintendent, say that this is the most racist place he's ever experienced it's hard to hear. It's hard to hear that truth. But the work you're doing with Black Excellence, I think, is something that we really need here. And this is speaking of someone who doesn't experience the racism and how difficult it is as a person of color. But just reading the star editorials and reading blog posts and hearing people say that they've left or they struggle here as a young Black professional, we need efforts like what you're putting out. And that's, I think, a really incredible thing. And, but you and I also talked a while back about, to Jason's point, about feeling like the problems aren't fixed. And what's cool about Kansas City is that there is such a great opportunity. And in my case, it was, let's change the built environment to make it more, make mobility more accessible, make our streets safer for kids to walk to school, and really make it a place where people can get healthy exercise by going out their front door and feeling safe doing that. We have a long way to go in that regard, and that's one of the things that drove me ended up running for city council, I guess. But sometimes it's about realizing what needs to get fixed in a city and taking a leading role in that, and city, state, or bigger. But yeah, it's Kansas City, I think, offers a lot of opportunity to get involved in a way that I didn't see as possible in other cities where I've lived. And, as Denver is an example, not that much bigger than Kansas City, but Kansas City just has this vibe about it that makes it feel a little bit more welcoming. And again, that's my experience as a white man. But I do think Kansas City offers that in a way that other cities really don't.
Yeah. No, and I won't make this about a retention strategy segment.
That's just what I like talking about, which is maybe says a lot about me. I don't know.
But I will just say this. I mean, I like to your point, Councilman Bunch, I do think Kansas City has an amazing opportunity over the next 2 to 5 years to really, get leaders and community, organizations and, corporate, to come together and to really try to make an impact. And BXKC is just one, but I think to me, it's my life mission. I mean, if I would be proud in 20 years if I can say, you know what, I had a hand in helping Black professionals stay in our city. But that only happens with a door being open and people being able to understand that, hey, we increase your dollar, we add value, and give me a minute or give me an opportunity to show you what you should do in the next year to have this done. So that's my tech talk for today. But my first question, I wanted to ask you guys, I know we're short on time, or we want to kind of get right to it, but there's so much going on. This has been a very tough year, to your point, Councilman Bunch, and you both bring just such a unique perspective nationally and locally. And here we are, we gotten through an election, and it feels like, is the election still happening? I mean, Joe and Kamala are the only two things we're taking out of 2020. So what the heck is going on in DC? And Jason, I'm not trying to put you on this the bull horn, but I mean, I'm so confused, like, as it relates to human decency, morals, values, ethics. What the heck is going on?
Well, I'm gonna try and do this as short as I can. So, okay. First thing that we got to start with is we won an election and it wasn't close. The presidential election was not close, and we defeated an incumbent president. So it's important to maintain perspective over those things because one, it feels like it's close because people are pretending it's close, and because the nature of the cable news environment is one that they dragged it out for several days. But the truth is, the proof that it wasn't close is two things. One, we just haven't had a situation before where one side had clearly lost but refused to concede that fact. So it just felt like it was still going on. And cable news obviously was happy to have people continue to watch. So it seemed like it took a week to decide this election, when in reality, we knew probably on election night, in most cases, it would have been decided. So it wasn't that close of an election. The second thing is, I think a lot of people feel, understandably, just shocked and surprised that 46% of the country voted for President Trump after everything that we've seen over the last 4 years. But it's really important to remember that change takes a lot of time, right? In people, and you're not just asking people to, when you're talking about not voting for an incumbent president who did technically win the election last time, you're not just asking people not to vote for somebody. You're asking them to, in many cases, say like they were wrong last time, right? That's just a really hard thing to accomplish. And so the fact that we won is a big deal. And I think and I'll just say one last thing about this. A lot of people feel like they want to separate themselves from folks who didn't vote the same way as them. And I have a whole podcast about the fact that that's not really an option for most of us who live in the Midwest, right? Or the South. Or basically, if you don't live in New York City or LA, or or frankly, even in our city, like if you live like in a spot that is entirely blue, like you may feel like you don't ever want to talk to any of these other people. But the truth is that whether they're in your family or whether they're just somebody you're going to end up working with, we are all going to end up interacting with people who didn't vote the way we voted. And we just don't, as natural as it is, we just don't win any extra points for righteous indignation. Like, yes, people voted in ways that you can certainly say, and you wouldn't be wrong, are tolerant of racism. But like, you're not going to cure that by shunning them. You're only going to break down those barriers by staying in their lives and as nice as you can, letting them know why that upsets you. And that's really uncomfortable for people, but that's the way forward.
Yeah, Councilman Eric, how has this changed or impacted you at a local policy level as it relates to just here in Kansas City, and then kind of now that everything is over, as we look to somewhat try to, like Jason said, work together with people who might have different opinions than you?
All right. It's interesting. to Jason's point, I live in a little bit of a, and I wouldn't say a little bit, definitely a blue bubble. I mean, if you look at the 4th District and how we vote, I mean, so it can feel sometimes like an echo chamber, or worse, it can sometimes not feel like an echo chamber and feel like it's reality. And I'm from rural Missouri, and so a lot of my not my immediate family. My mom's a big Jason Kander fan, so she would, if she's not watching this, she's definitely missing out because she's.
I forget which town you're from.
I'm from a town called Bonne Terre, Missouri. It's about an hour south of St. Louis.
Absolutely, Bonne Terre,
St. Francis County. It used to be a pretty reliable Democratic voting area. That's that like a lot of rural Missouri has gone.
I had a birthday there once.
What's that?
It used to be so much of a place the Democrats regularly campaigned in that I spent my birthday in
I'm sorry that you spent your birthday.
Yeah, I had a great time
there. I hope you went and visited the world famous lead mine to your tour.
I had some really good pie. I remember that.
There's something for everyone in Bonne Terre, I guess. But I feel as though I can relate somewhat, but over the last few years, I felt a bit of a disconnect from family and friends who may have voted a different way because Trump has done something that has like made me question I used to be such a proud like rural Missourian but there's been something that's come out of this Trump administration that's I think brought out a side of people that I didn't expect to see. And I think the biggest thing is the rhythm. Honestly, it felt as though a lot of folks were able to just come out of the woodwork and be more blatant with it. And that's not, again, not me experiencing it, but hearing things that people say and that's been hard for me. That's been hard for me to really sort of question my reality and who I am and where I'm from. But at the same time, we don't come back. We don't see what happened in Georgia, in Missouri, if we just shut them out. And I think, Jason is a great example of, I think, how it's possible. I mean, to win a statewide election and come very close to defeating an incumbent statewide in Missouri as a Democrat. It's possible. And I would love to, not that I have any interest in ever running for statewide office in Missouri.
You should totally do it.
But I think it would be interesting just to understand, like, how do you do that? How do you relate to folks in rural Missouri, in this current environment, especially in, say, 2016, when things were really drastically starting to change in Missouri. But I will say that one thing I do know is that we don't get there. We don't see what happened in Georgia by understanding that we're a state that has about 30% urban, 30% suburban, 30% rural. Numbers are maybe slightly off, but we're a state that's very diverse. And so how do you engage with folks who maybe at completely opposite ends of the spectrum politically? We don't get there by just completely shutting off the conversations, though, to Jason's point.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions that like national pundits have about places like where we live is that connecting with voters of the other party or independent voters is a question of moderating yourself on policy, because what it assumes is that these gettable voters are like in the middle. And the truth is, like, the gettable voters, some of them are left, some of them are right, some are in the middle, some of them don't really know. Mostly they're just people with like real lives going on, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think the way that you connect is like you just stand for something, right? And then I think the other big problem that we need to start talking about as a country is like, Americans don't really know each other anymore. Like, and Kansas City is a great microcosm of this example. Like, we have this conversation about where Kansas City is and where it's going, and sort of underladen in the entire thing is Troost, right? I mean, and the truth is, how many people who live west of Troost really have friends, not like people that they know through work, people that, like relationships cease to truce and vice versa. And America's in the same situation. And the reason that is so much more stark than it was even, frankly, when we had actual segregation, like in the law, I think one of the reasons it feels so much more stark is that this is the longest period in American history without some form of mandatory service. Like, there's nothing forcing Americans to actually know people who don't live and think and work exactly the way they do. And then on top of that, we have more than 3 channels by far. So we're not having a common experience in what we consume. And so I just think the big national conversation that we're going to have at some point here is like, how do we make everybody get to know each other again? It doesn't have to be the military, but like, folks ought to spend some time knowing people who are not the same as them.
That's good.
And Jason, you bring up a good point about being willing to, I guess, stand for something. And I think that I think we do like to place things like neatly in a box as left or right. And I think what at least in my experience, and again, I ran in a district that is predominantly progressive.
Yeah, but you work in politics. You see that,
But I think it is really important to. I think that people come along with, like, not only are we supposed to figure out where your constituents are, but also I think you have a role to play in driving policy direction and also driving like public discourse on important issues. Like right now, it is very much about law enforcement and public safety and what does that mean in our communities. And I think that we can get sort of derailed by all the marketing discussion going on with defund the police versus whatever. But I think it's more important to stand firmly on something and pick. When there are 2 sides, like actually picking a side, and that's sometimes hard to do. But I think it's really, I think in my experience so far, people, I think, respond, not everyone. I mean, I still get a lot of nasty emails about the Black Lives Matter murals that we did and things of that nature. But, just as an example, on local control of the police department, we're the only major city in the United States that has the state-run police department the way we have, governor-run specifically. And, coming out and saying, well, let's actually like say definitively as a city council that it is a priority of ours to regain local control. There's not a realistic path through the state legislature to make that happen. But it's important to me. It was important for us to put that. We passed the resolution yesterday with it as our top priority. Is finally us saying local control of our police department is absolutely critical for moving forward with the critical reforms we need to make public safety be the front and center and not just law and order and law enforcement in the way that we've always done it. And I think that that's a position that can come off as strong but it's one that I think most people can get behind. The particular
just makes sense.
It makes sense, and we know that we send innocent people to jail. The police department, the police officers often are brutal to citizens of this city as well as across the country, and those are things that have to change in order for us to move forward, and in order for us to start to peck away at ending systemic racism. But again, it's like pick something and work on it, and I think that it drives the public discourse that may or may not have happened. And I'm really impressed with the city council up in Minneapolis that said, hey, we're going to completely rethink this and we're going to redo and completely reimagine what public safety really is in this city. And other cities have done that as well. And I think that they've driven public discourse in a way that you often don't see local elected officials do.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, you can't not rethink it, because even till today, there are still things in those policies that weren't built for people who look like me. I mean, I don't know we all know why it was maybe different for George Floyd and us being home in the midst of a pandemic. And that's the only thing you could think about. You had to watch TV for 8 minutes and 46 seconds at a knee in the neck and take brunt of that. and to be mindful of time. So, no, we're right at 30. Jason, I want you and Councilman to kind of talk about this. Obviously we got Joe and Kamala going in too. There's so many things that we have to still come to a grips that we have a long way to go, a lot of policy to change, and not just policy, but just like you said, people don't know each other anymore. So what would you say are like some small, like little bitty things like every day that we can work on? And to your point, Councilman, some things here in Kansas City, maybe we can still kind of, be mindful of, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. We have a long way to go, but there's still things that we can do.
Well, I'll tee it up for Eric by saying that it's, we've gone through a presidential election year, and we've also, frankly, just gone through 4 years where, thanks in part to the fact that we had a reality star as president, and thanks in part to the fact that we just had a president who, frankly, was just out of control every day. Those two things together meant that our national politics became the center of everything, right? Even local politics. I mean, and popular culture, they just merged. And now we're coming into a phase where we have this opportunity to, I think it would be too much to say normalize the situation, but we do have an opportunity to semi-return to a place where not all politics is about what has been tweeted out by somebody in Washington. And that means that for anybody who wants to get involved, I would encourage people to get involved. Doesn't mean you got to run for office if you don't want to, but just get involved at your local level. Because if what you really care about are the things we've been talking about the last few minutes, progressive values, advancing those values, then the best way to do that is to create progress in the community that people can see, right? So, the stuff that Eric is working on at the council, the stuff and look, I'll just say, I think Quentin's doing a great job, and I'm really proud of his leadership, and that stuff matters, because as people around Kansas City, not even people in Kansas City, just like folks who live in more suburban or rural areas, as they see progress happen at the local level, being made by progressive people on progressive ideas, well, that's how you sell progressive values, is you just create progress that people can actually see. At the end of the day, the progressive political argument is, whether we like it or not, an argument in favor of the idea that government can actually work and do good things. And so that's what I mean when I say I teed up for Eric to just talk about those things.
Yeah, the thing about local politics, and it's honestly the reason I got involved, and the reason why I sort of mostly not jokingly said that my interest is not running for a statewide office, is because I think that local politics is really important, because it has a direct impact on your daily life. And I say that all the time, and people probably get tired of me saying it, but literally it's a thing that you see as soon as you walk out your front door. It's the basic quality of life stuff that the average person contends with on a daily basis. The sidewalk in front of your house, is the route to school, whether there's potholes in your streets. And I think, going down to the level of potholes, I think, is oversimplifying it and maybe not looking at the big picture, but really, like, the thing that makes your life better is almost always is there a grocery store down the street? What's the park like? And even at the school board level, like, what's the quality of education at your local school district? And, and of course, national and state politics play a definitive role in a lot of those things, but you have so much more impact with your voice by working at the local level in a way that you don't have the same connection to. Maybe at the state level, your state rep is generally really accessible. I know Jason was there,
but they're one of 163, so it goes.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of one of 13,
right?
And even the mayor, I think, here is very accessible, so I just think that people often, voting turnout is very low in local elections, whether it's to elect to when we're voting for us, but also in like bond elections and sales tax elections, upcoming earnings tax election. Please vote yes to renew the earnings tax in April. But those things matter, I think, and have such a direct impact. And this is a city where you can get to know your elected official. I know that I'm was a lot more accessible before COVID. But it's a place where you can get involved and get directly and have a relationship with that person. And I think that that's really exciting and really great. But another thing that I found interesting in all of this COVID stuff, that we did, the city did a scientific survey of the residents about their feelings on response to COVID. And it was fascinating to see, like, the question was something like, how much do you trust the different elected officials at the government officials at different levels? At the national level, the trust, like, it was like 25% of people trusted what was coming out of the national government officials, which that could be partly who's in the White House. That probably has a lot to do with it. But it went up slightly at the state level, and it was highest at the local level. And that's not to toot our horn. It's not to toot Quentin's horn, but it is to say that I think that because that relationship is so much closer and you have so much better access to these local folks, that and there's 13 of them instead of hundreds at the state and national level, you just have that closer relationship. And I think that that's really important. I think it's something that people often don't think about. So what I would say is just get involved at the local level, whether it's getting to know your school board member or getting to know your city council person or getting elected to your neighborhood board. There are lots of things that you can do to make incremental change in the city, and local politics I think is vitally important for just getting your quality of life improved and making a difference in your own neighborhood.
Well, you guys will have to grab barbecue when things get better. Jason, I'll have to get you back to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Councilman, you're always welcome. We'll have to get both of you guys back together. I'm definitely fans, and we got to do this again. I know babies are flying, diapers are moving.
No diapers at this house anymore.
Well, the true story is, I think it was giving you a run, Kander, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah. I mean, thanks to my daughter. I mean, we're pretty knee deep at this point. Not to make it be too graphic, but hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is really great. This is really great. And Kiona, keep it up. And I know we'll stay in touch. And I need to come visit you at the Negro League Baseball Museum as well. I haven't been in a long time, but
I know.
Keep up all the great things you're doing. It's really, your energy is so exciting, and it's so refreshing to have young people just get involved, especially with your work to elevate the voices of young Black professionals here. I think is something that we need more of, and please keep it up, and let's stay in touch.
All right, let's get into some good trouble. Kander, you got to tell us, are you going to make that state run? Like, no. This is the breaking news right here.
I'm looking forward to supporting you and Eric. I mean, look, my life is right where I want it right now. I mean, I run an organization that's national and that I care about, and I have a voice in politics, and I got a young family, and I'd like to stay right here in Kansas City, keep doing what I'm doing. So, all
right, thank you guys for coming on.
All right, you bet.
See y'all later. Good to see you.
Right.
Hey, you guys, thanks so much for tuning in. This episode will replay next Monday at 8:30, just for people who didn't catch this midday to be able to watch it again. What an amazing conversation I was able to have with them both. And thank you all so much. I'm very much looking forward to 2021 because I myself will be able to add some new content and roll out some more exciting things for Up Next as I look and kind of create what this podcast will continue to be and how I want to leverage this as we move forward to connect real truths in the community. And so thank you all so much for every single time I have something, watch this, share this, kind of promote. It doesn't go unnoticed. And thank you all for joining in. End of 2020 on to 2021. Thank you.